Hey folks, welcome to the KTRN, the Kastle Talk Radio Network. And right now I have Dano on the line with me. It's kind of apropos for this thing that we're going to talk about tonight, which is the TQ, the tolerance question. The question of tolerance in modernity and the intolerance of tolerance. We're all just hanging out, me and Dano. We're just chilling. We have tornado warnings going off, so if you hear sirens, don't worry. Unless I see the anvil strike, or if I see the daggone, or hear the train noise, or I see the daggone circular winds, I'm not worried. If you hear my wife in the background carrying the dogs downstairs, I'll be doing it with her, and then I'll be right back. So anything that happens, don't be stressed about. I'm not. And Dano and I are both cert qualified, so we just know what we're looking for. So how you doing tonight, brother?
Man, not too bad. So I know everyone's like, what's KTRN? KTRN came out of a sit down today. The castles have officially merged.
Yes, we have. The castles of Dano and the castle of Kaiser. We are one now. He stopped by the physical manifestation of the war room. And we chewed the fat, decided what we were going to do, and how we were going to approach this stuff. Because we've seen what's been going on in talk radio, and we think it's gone silly. And so we're going to try to bring calm and patience. Sorry for the siren. It's just a tornado siren. You know, this is a part of the TQ question we're going to talk about tonight. Isn't that right, Dano?
Absolutely. Yeah, the sirens make it all cool and everything.
Isn't it? It's like we're in a bomb shelter, brother. But we're in Kaiser's castle and we're in Dano's castle. Both of them merged. There we go, baby. You can't get through our dank, dark, gray walls of stone.
We have to looseth the hounds for the intruders.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Tolerance. Man, tolerance. You know, you and I kind of talked about this a little bit today.
Yeah.
And it's weird. It's weird how there's intolerance of tolerance. And while some folks may see this as a play on words, when you really think about everything that we've seen happen with some children and some school districts pushing the anti-gun agenda,
right?
With you have to leave, you have to get out of school. If you don't leave school, you're going to be suspended, kind of a deal.
Yeah.
If a child says, well, I don't want to be part of it, well, we don't care. You didn't do what we wanted you to do after we locked you in the classroom, which is unlawful imprisonment. Just in case anyone, you know, really wants to take it a step here, we can take it up a step. Anyone walks away, leaves a student in a room and locks them in that classroom with no supervision is technically, by the letter of the law, I do believe that qualifies as unlawful imprisonment.
It does. And guess what? It's state-sponsored. Isn't that funny, Dano?
Well, no, it isn't funny. But the problem is that, you know, while we have a teachers union down in Kentucky striking because they're unhappy with the pensions situation and the way that it's working out down there, it kind of irritates me a little bit. Dano's and folks, we are allowed to get irritated with things.
Yes.
But the biggest part of the problem, though, is that the teachers unions want things to be their way. Remember, retirement for the teachers union, the firefighters, and the police officers, that's paid into a separate fund all their own. They don't think that John Q. Public is smart enough to be able to go ahead and participate in that system. So that's why anytime you hear about reformation of Social Security, all of a sudden you have your liberals screaming, oh, God, no, you can't have that. well, they're not smart enough to know what to do with their money.
Right. The funniest thing is people don't realize in Ohio, the Kentucky people, I understand exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to model off Ohio. And
Right.
Ohio, the firefighters' pension and the police pension funds were completely solvent. They were fine. The teacher's pension was not. We're seeing a redo of the same thing in Kentucky. And if the Kentucky citizens do not understand this, ask them, talk to their police, see what's happening, and basically they're stealing the pensions from the firefighters who risk their lives, the police people who risk their lives. And here's something that I can say. Sorry about that. Let me shut this off. And what we're seeing, in my opinion, is, in my humble opinion, what we're seeing is a redo of exactly what happened in Ohio. The teachers want the police to bail them out. So maybe these school shootings, if we actually look at them and we're honest, maybe they are being done with purpose. I know that sounds all conspiratorial, and many of you might not want to hear it. Go on, Dano. I've got to find something. Something just.
All right. That's okay. Take your time. Well, the whole thing, though, is that these retirement funds, the pensions are going insolvent from California, from west to east. These retirement funds are going insolvent. The part of the public employees' pensions for their retirees, they've had to cut medical benefits to their retirees who retired with the full faith that when they went ahead and they contributed their retirement dollars to the system, that there was going to be no change in the game. And now it's starting to cost additional money.
Right.
The larger part of the problem, though, is that they now want us to bail them out.
Right.
But they do not see a viable option. They need to suck it up and they need to get over it. Why? And I know it's going to be really kind of be viewed as cruel. I really don't care. But had they gone ahead and invested their funds in the Social Security system, it would have been totally different. Everything more than likely would have been just fine. But this is what I will say. Is if the union employees had contributed to the retirement to Social Security, the same retirement system that we're all, stuck living with that we don't necessarily really like, they would not have been so quick to let Democrats go ahead and raid that trust fund to fund their welfare programs, the other entitlements that have been given away for years when people have had zero obligation to be productive members of society and work where they can work.
Wait, didn't Al Gore, when he ran and he followed off of Bill Clinton, didn't they say that was put in a Social Security lockbox? The lockbox is there for them. See, here's the fraudulent stuff that me and Dano are talking about. We know what we're talking about on this. And it's all part of dumbing down of America. The teachers will say, well, we teach your kids, you're not qualified. Well, yes, they are qualified. Any person's qualified to critique teachers. And honestly, the intolerance of tolerance, we're going to get to that, but this is a systemic thing. We have academia making these people think they're super intelligent and they know better than us. They try to go after homeschooling. They try to go after everything that is pure, that is something that is Americana. But instead, we get fed that we're ignorant, we can't teach our own children. And it's about the breakup of society, in all honesty. So that's my 2 cents, Dano. Jump in.
That's all. Yeah, that's just all part of that overall UN agenda.
Mm-hmm.
I never want to believe that the UN could necessarily really do anything bad, but as we've watched their peacekeepers continue to engage in criminal behavior of which they're never held accountable for, and the UN itself as a body is never held accountable for any of these bad decisions, these bad actors, the bad actions, or anything like this, there's definitely a larger agenda that is in play here that a lot of people are willing to ignore. I'm not prepared to ignore it, though. Therein lies the difference.
I know that, Dano, and neither am I. Look, you know my backstory. You're in my castle. I've been in your castle. We're brothers in a lot of ways. We're veterans. I was a part of the naval service, and so was he. He was in the Navy. I was in the Marine Corps. The funny thing about this is I was a peacekeeper. I've worked peacekeeping missions, and I've seen what the third world, and I do mean the way I said it, the third world peacekeepers get brought in with us, and you will see they human traffic, child traffic, you report it. Oh, no, you can't report that because that's our ally. The muff fake you're fed daily is pathetic. And Dano knows this too. This is, if you think it's new, guys, I've been doing this since the Cold War. And so has Dano. We've seen this. Dano knows what he's talking about. I know what I'm talking about. And like I said, this will all tie in when we get down and talk about how academia, how the media, notice they only want to report certain things, and then when they report them, it's always askew, and all of a sudden there's another shooting today, and we're not going to get into that. But the funny thing to me is, why is it going the way it is? Why are the teachers and the students having such a voice when it's about an actual amendment? Remember, the First Amendment's about speech, which they're trying to take away on YouTube and Facebook and other platforms, Google. Now, you think about the Second Amendment guarantees every other amendment we have if there's a despotic government. Why is that, Dano?
Well, you got to have that. We also kind of discussed this today. We always hear about how the Second Amendment doesn't apply to semi-automatic weapons.
Right.
Remember, when the Constitution was written, the military-grade weapon of the day was swords, smoothbore pistols, smoothbore muskets, smoothbore cannon.
Yeah.
These were all the military-grade weapons of the day. I don't think they got anything with a projectile twist until after, I think, the Civil War, if I remember right.
No, the 1781 Harper's Ferry pistol actually did have a twist. It was done manually while it was still hot. And that's why that's the symbol of the Military Police Corps, just as an aside.
There you go. You see, hang out with them old crusty veterans. They got a little bit of education. But you know what? And a little bit of history. But this is something else. You see, the problem is, though, is that we're getting this back to the subject of intolerance. And I know that you did a previous episode about manliness. We have these breakdowns in our society because this is not taught in school. Right. None of it is taught in school. The things that are not taught in school, the Holocaust isn't taught. The actions of the Germans of World War II are not taught. Not exactly like our guys, in other situations, acted all that terribly honorable.
Right.
We'd always go back to Janet Reno and Waco, ATF. I mean, we can go to the Bundys. We can go to Ruby Ridge. I mean, we have... Gunwalker. Wounded Knee.
Yes.
I knew the young man who was shot by a sniper at Wounded Knee. And, no government is without fault or guilt in some way, shape, or form, because no matter how it's seen, it's going to be seen right in some folks' eyes, is going to be seen wrong in others' folks' eyes. But when you do not teach the full history like they used to teach in civics,
Yes.
back in the day, they don't have civics now, because I always find it amazing how how there's a complaint about, well, there's no financial teaching anymore. That's what civics was for. Civics, they went ahead and they taught you how to read that check. They taught you how to go ahead and understand about savings and putting money back. Not that all of us really did that great at it at some time, but those were all those subjects that were taught. Now, when I was coming back to Don Scott Field today, I was listening to a real radio station out of Cincinnati, and
we can say what it is. It's WLW. It has a 1,000,000-watt license, the only one in the U.S. And they have some good people on there. And
they have great people on there, and they have knowledgeable people. And it isn't schmuck radio like we get on the terrestrial side here. Yep. And we're at in Columbus. And it's a shame we have to listen to an out-of-town radio to have a on-air talent that possesses the brain process to understand and give a valid conversation with both points of both sides of the points of the situation. So it's a little irritating that we have to go to that extreme to be able to go ahead and have this. There's also a lot of things about the Civil War that hasn't been taught. You know, Mitch Landrieu went ahead, and I don't know how he managed to do this, but someone decided that they were going to go ahead and award him the JFK Medal or Award for Bravery because he's taking down the statues removing of the Civil War, the makings of the Civil War, removing
our history.
You can't remove our history, and besides the Landows, it's a criminal enterprise. It's as bad as what the Clintons are in a lot of respects, and most people don't know that. Why? Because the lamestream media refuses to be able to go ahead and to fully report without bias the inactions of what's going on. I saw a video not too long ago talk about New Orleans for a minute, and they were talking about the country of the Netherlands.
Right.
The Netherlands are below the sea level.
Right.
The Netherlands, instead of spending their money on more entitlement programs, instead of building stupid aquariums that don't matter, instead of taking their flood control money and spending it on parties and favors to friends and donors.
Like New Orleans.
Like New Orleans did, right. They went ahead and they built genuine seawalls, because remember, the country of the Netherlands, it is times 10 what they suffer there if it was to be compared to New Orleans. Nothing even close to like it, because they're on the North Sea.
Yeah.
So when those seas kick up and they get angry, these are real problems. They're not the little white caps that they get out of off the Gulf. Now, I'm not saying that the Gulf always gets white caps. That's not a fair and accurate statement.
Right.
But what I will tell you, if you were to take a look at the weather that they receive in the there in the Netherlands and compare it to New Orleans, it's two different animals, vastly different, and there is no equal comparison whatsoever. Although I'm sure that we could find someone that would try to go ahead and argue that they're equal in that aspect, which they're not. I'm just going to tell you now they're not. But I was watching the article that was on there. It was a video package. And in that video package, they were talking about, and they showed the gates. The gates went into play. Here in Franklin County, we have flood control in some areas. We have fake flood control in some areas.
Like the areas around where we had a flood. There was a great flood in the Columbus area. And during that time, it came up through the hilltop. and people who aren't from this area will not know what we're speaking of. But it went devastationally into the town. And so once a year, they have all these walls put up, and there's even roads that go through it. And they have these little walls that come in, these steel barriers, to try to maintain the waters. But the funny part is, even with all that, it's not actually been tested because it was like 1,000-year flood that we had. And we haven't had that yet.
Well, not too long ago, with one of our community emergency response team meetings, we went ahead and we were certified to be able to go ahead and how to run the sandbagging machine.
Right.
Well, you better have a back to do this because there's nothing easy about it. So that's that in a nutshell. They have the sections of the barriers that they go ahead and they pull across. It's a pulley system. They have to go ahead and utilize vehicles pulling in opposite directions. It's a very time-consuming procedure that they do, because these are concrete and steel walls that they believe that in the event that this would be the case, that they would have another 1,000-year event, that it's going to be able to go ahead and hold it off. Right. Now, in the area of East North Broadway and 315, there at Riverside Hospital, it was disclosed to us that their flood control efforts there will fail. But yet they press on. They have misspent money. They have misappropriated money. And they have put those folks in a very, very false sense of security, because if they ever get hit with another event like the last one that hit the bottoms years ago, that hospital will be underwater all the way up to the second floor. So these things, these are the things that when we get down to it in the end, it takes accountability on the part of government, but it also takes accountability on the part of our school boards and our education associations, which always will tell you the levy is for the good of the children. Remember, most of your school levies that are passed, over 88% of that budget goes to certified and non-certified employees. The employees always are fast to tell you, well, I didn't get a raise last year. In that contract package that they get 2 increases every year. They get a step increase. Runs anywhere from 2 to sometimes 5%. That's automatic. There's no negotiation to that. That's all part of the contract. Why? Because it's doomed for failure, because that's the way we've always done it.
Yeah, but you think about this. In Columbus, and that's a big city in Ohio, the capital city, right?
Right.
Here's the funniest part. Who has been leading it since Buck Reinhardt left?
Oh, it's been the Democrats, no doubt, because
and where do we see
has been in full swing?
And where do we see the graft and corruption completely, even into what the last presidential election happened with, the entire thing with Clinton with Uranium One. It's always been the Democrats, but they will throw it to Republicans. And now you have to deny. It's just like if you said to me, Dano,
okay,
when's the last time you beat your wife? Okay, well, if I was a cuck,
first. You gotta survive it first.
If I was a cuck, I'd be like, well, I don't beat my wife, and I'd be like, I beat my wife daily. So what? Now let's have a conversation. Then they would talk to my wife, and my wife would be like, no, he's never touched me, right? But but see, I believe in the double down process. You say you agree with them just because they're morons. It's just like if they call you a name, you agree with them. Whatever. It doesn't matter what they think of you, and it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks of you. The truth will always out. So here's the thing. At the end of this actually is awesome, because it's going to go right into the question of tolerance soon. the tolerance of intolerance.
Mm-hmm.
When we get to this, you guys, your minds will be blown because they are now feeding on their own. The left is feeding, and Hydrogen Hillary, as Styx Hexenhammer says all the time, is going to be the downfall of the Democratic Party as it stands, because she is still the spokesman for them. She will not shut her fucking mouth. That's a fact. And there is a time when a person, including me, Dano will tell me, shut your mouth if I'm saying something and being a moron.
Right.
So here we go. Honest conversation. You had it on.
Honest conversation. This does not originate with Hillary Clinton.
I know
that's
that. Yeah.
part of the problem. This has been a dishonest conversation since Wilson.
Yep.
And well before Wilson. So this goes back nearly 100 years.
Yeah.
It's coming up on right around 100 years. And they, the folks that are less influential always seem to get the shaft.
Yep.
Those who have the money, they have the relationships from college, much like Pizzagate.
Yep.
And Pizzagate, we're going to start to see if you watch Craig's page. It's getting more real all the time. If you watch Craig's page, so Craig Salman Sawyer, he's out there on the front line doing this stuff. You should see some of these things. Yeah. You should see the people that they're saving from the slave trade of our female citizens and our young children.
Not just people. People forget this. And I mean this, and people don't understand. It's children. It's absolutely children that have been trafficked. And nobody wants to talk about it.
Well, no, they don't want to talk about it. They don't talk about the way that the British trafficked the Irish for years. Most people don't know that when the slave trade in Irish and black slaves took place, the black slaves inherently always brought a higher dollar on the head as compared to the Irish. Yeah. You want to really have an honest conversation, we need to go back to the Brits whose asses we whipped in the Revolutionary War, which is why we have the 3%, because only 3% of the population turned against them and whipped asses. Yeah. And stood up. We had help from the French. We had help from the Germans. Yep. It was something that benefited everybody in the end. But when you really get down to it, a lot of the things that we see and we hear, it's been going on for years, tens of years, hundreds of years. And the British have a very well documented problem with not only selling the Irish. I don't think they stopped selling. I think the Irish slave trade probably ended sometime around the First World War, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. But even then, still, we have the problem with the pedophiles and pedophiles out there trafficking and teenagers and prepubescent children.
Right.
And they have these children dressed up in the most disgusting way. Some of the things that they do, some of the pictures that they produce, some of the videos that they produce, it makes you want to react in a very non-human way and eliminate that person engaging in that act, because it is just that bad. If you have an ounce, and it doesn't even take as much of an ounce of compassion, you will want to stand up and say, we can't do this. We won't tolerate this. I read an article the other day about the Rockefeller that partnered with Mr. Carnegie, who had the U.S. Steel. The original Rockefeller had Standard Oil. Yep. and how they partner together to have a monopoly over those two industries, which while, it has had, no one can dispute, a plus to the country as a whole in a way that Europe never got to see it as to what we've had here. There's still descendants of these people that are carrying out their sick plans, their sick actions, without being even brought to justice.
Well, if you think about it, on the KTRN, we are very familiar as being young men when this was around. So Ohio, Standard Oil of Ohio, right? You brought up Carnegie and all that stuff. But Standard Oil of Ohio was Carnegie, right?
Right.
And all the on their ilk of the Rockefellers, this, that, and the other. Now, they broke up those monopolies. Some people don't realize that Google, Facebook, YouTube, they're going to be called a monopoly. It's going to happen. And they're going to be broken up. And that's what's making the globalists shit their pants. Because they realize, look, history does not echo. It rhymes. And it continuously rhymes. And anybody who knows this understands what I'm talking about. There's always a problem with the same people trying to pull power moves. And it's because they don't want the regular guy, like me and Dano, to ever wake up. We should just be consumerist. And they teach, and this is where we're going to go to the question of tolerance at this point. They don't want us to realize that we have control. They want to keep putting us down to be consumerist. And when you look at consumerism with the intolerance of tolerance, when you have people that say I'm a furry, that means, they put a butt plug up their bum and they daggone have some sort of furry tail coming out of it, and they say I'm a wolf, and they wear little ears and whatever. And when you have cloppers, this is something I just discovered thanks to the Boiler Room, where people are actually wearing hooves. I mean, it's stupid. And clopping around. Bronies, all these little things that they keep pointing out. And how many now sexes are there instead of 2? So we have to accept that to be tolerant. Well, that's intolerant because nobody can dispute that tolerance is, I don't care really what somebody's sexual orientation is, and I'm sure you don't either, Dano.
Right.
That's their business behind closed doors. I'm sorry, I don't really want to see. Everybody looks like a moron whenever they're doing the things they do in their bedroom. I mean, nobody looks good doing that. It's just a process to make more babies. But if you're not doing it to make babies, then you're doing it for your own thing. And that's fine. That's your weirdness. I don't need to be a part of it. And neither does Dano. But if you say something that, man, there's just something wrong with this because I'm not tolerant. Well, I'm tolerant to the point to where it's not affecting me and my child. Once it affects my child and you're trying to drag them into it, and this goes back to human trafficking and child trafficking, then we have a problem. Because no normal man or woman is going to stand for having their child. And look, Dano brought up a great point, and I'm going to end when I say this, brother, and I'll let you run on. Europe has already accepted child grooming, sadly. England has, but they ban certain people that point this stuff out.
Right.
Germany has too, and so that's the first world, right? So that's why I made that one video on the sticky wet masturbational fantasy of civil war, because you will turn America quickly into a second to third world nation very fast if there's civil war that happens. Here's the problem that nobody wants to talk about. There's going to be no Germans, no French, no British to come and try to help us bring us back to the first world. We've helped them. They can't help us. And that's where I'll leave that. Go on, Dano.
All right, thank you. Well, the bigger part of the problem, though, is that when you really get down to it about the intolerance of tolerance, I saw a really good tweet this week, and it came from Mr. Trump. They were talking about bisexuality. Right. Now, remember, they want us to have more than two sexes.
Right.
They want this. But when you look at what the gay community has to offer, LG, lesbian, gay, B, bisexual, transgender, and then, what is that new letter they want to throw in there?
Q, queer.
Yeah, queer.
Yeah, LGBTQ.
Yeah, redundancy is the easiest meaning that I can bring to that. There's definitely redundancy, but bisexuality means that there's only two sexes.
Yeah.
But yet we have an element of our society that's very set to be able to say, hey, now, whoa, wait a minute. I don't identify as a male or a female today, but it can go ahead and it can change from one day to the next. Let me take a real quick call and I'll be right back.
All right,
with you.
no problem. So, while he's doing that, what I'll tell you guys, here's my opinion.
Hello.
We all know.
Hi, what are you doing?
Hey, you may want to mute your mic.
I'm doing a show with James.
Mute your mic. Mute your mic. Mute your mic.
There it is. All right, got it now.
All right, cool.
No.
Mute your mic. Anyways, what I'm trying to tell you guys, in all honesty, is that don't worry about any of the stuff that they're throwing at you right now. The question of tolerance, the TQ, okay, tolerance question, that's what we need to focus on. Because when you tolerate everything, you will be tolerating anything. There was something that came up when Dano and I were young, and there was something called uncalled for. And you could be exactly correct, and I'm being very blatant. You could be exactly correct on what you're talking about, on what you've said, and yet you did something that was uncalled for. At the time you did that, you knew you were wrong. You knew you were wrong. And I will tell you, here's where it comes from. We forgot who our fathers were. We forgot who our fathers were, and those fathers had nothing to do with their sons. I was a bastard. Have no shame in my game about being a bastard at all. But I made sure I would never have a son that did not know his father. Because it's our blood. It is transmitted through that ether to our children. And when Dano's ready, he can come back on. But here's the thing that really is important that you all need to know. The tolerance question is a problem. What are you going to tolerate? Are you going to tolerate having your child taken? Whoa, wait. We already have. How many people have had their children taken by the state just because they said something wrong? You know, you think I'm brave for saying this. No, my son's grown. I did not indoctrinate him. I'm sure Dano didn't indoctrinate his kids. And what I'll tell you is, our children carry the line. And it really irritates me, and I'm posting the pic of it. They call us spam bots. Yeah, we're in your interwebs selling you Viagra. Why do you think pornography is being thrown down your throat? Are you going to wake up? Are you going to stand up? Are you going to ask questions? That's the entire point of the intolerance of tolerance. Because they don't tolerate you. If you say something they disagree with, they want to shut your speech down. Dano, you're back?
Yeah, I'm back. So that'll take us to David Pig Hogg.
Yeah.
Now, they want to go ahead and they want to ban our weapons. Good luck with that. It's okay.
Yeah,
we luck that out. Freaking try me. But they're all upset because, well, we have clear backpacks.
Yeah.
That violates our freedoms. You little smart asses, what did you think was going to happen? Did you think that you were going to walk away and get everything that you wanted because you're taking money from George Soros and everything is going to be okay and you're going to say and do what you want and no one's going to be there to put you in check?
They're the elite.
They're not that elite.
I know,
they're
I'm making a joke.
good enough to go to Gitmo for military tribunals, though. They are good enough for that.
Yeah.
Little rats. Yeah, most definitely. They are, while they may believe themselves to be elite, it'll just be like the French Revolution when they took the elites to the guillotine.
It equalized everybody.
Yeah. So, I mean, really, when you get down to it, this all is contributed to by the breakdown of the nuclear family.
You're exactly right.
The nuclear family, the start of the breakdown of the nuclear family was the movement of the feminists, because the feminists believed that it wasn't, well, you don't want to be at home barefoot and pregnant. You don't want to take care of your husband. You don't want to take care of your kids. I would love to see the crime stats from the FBI, pre and post feminist, for children that end up in our system. Because trust and believe, I think I'm probably going to be backed up pretty well with this. This is going to end up being a situation where when the mothers weren't there to keep things in check, and we all know that our mothers rode herd when it came to this, for those of us who had that luxury, because not everyone had that luxury to have, both parents at home. But what has happened is that with the destruction of the nuclear family by the feminists, because they believe that women were being so held down and treated so unfairly, all of a sudden it's a problem. It isn't a problem. And now we're finding more and more families with the ability to telecommute, which is work from home. Mm-hmm. This is taking place now. We're seeing more ladies coming home and gentlemen being home and working from home, thus allowing them to be able to go ahead and have that ability to be responsible for homeschooling their children.
Yeah.
School children typically run at a higher educational level in all skills. And I'm saying all skills because a lot of times if you encounter a sophomore or a junior in a homeschooled environment, they are 2 to 3 years further advanced than what their public school counterparts are.
Yes.
It is a huge world of difference, and yet everyone wants to be able to say, oh, no, you got to come into the public sector. No, you don't have to come into the public sector to be indoctrinated with what we've been seeing happening after the shootings in Florida. And we're not saying that someone being shot is a good thing. We're not saying that this a great, cool thing to have going on. But what we are saying is that the way that this was all prevented before was that there was a parent that was there a better part of the time to be able to go ahead and keep it in place. Our school administrators were able to go ahead and have it together to where, well, our people in the schools, the teachers, the administrators, they were respected. We don't have the thing that we have today.
I'll tell you, here's where I think it broke down. I'm going to be very frank and honest with all of you guys out there. If you're millennials or you're Gen Zs, I'm going to tell you where it broke down. Being a bastard, having only a mother and a twin sister. My mother and my twin sister, you know, they're females. You know, they tell you what they think, and, you know, for your whole life you think, you know, for your whole life before you, well, with my situation at 17, went in the military and realized what women wanted. And they don't want the cuck. They don't want the guy that will roll over for anything. They'll all say that, but they want the Chad. But here's the thing about it that I discovered with all this muff fake that gets thrown at us as men, and it is about manliness, is mentors, fortunately for me, stepped into that breach. And they told me, they called me on my shit when I was stupid. They called me on anything, even if I was correct. They may praise you, but they'll also critique you. And there was no ass hurt over the critique. That's why when I say on every podcast I do, tell me what your opinion is. I mean that. Because I want to hear it. I may disregard it or whatever, but I'm going to answer you. If you're a troll, I go back, bro, I've been a troll for a long time. And if you're trolling, I'll ignore you. But if you're actually giving a good critique, I will answer. And so would you, Dano. And that's the difference, you know. I had a different upbringing. I don't know Dano's upbringing. We haven't gotten into that in our private chats, and I don't need to know. See, there's a lot of things. A man doesn't need to know everything about another man except what they know about that person.
Well, but then there are things that are easy to pick up on. Some things not quite so easy. But the larger part of the problem is that young men and young women are not being raised as young men and young women.
And corporal punishment has been taken out of school, along with a little bit of learning of the book, the Christ book.
Well, yeah, the Bible, the Bible. You know, this is a problem. This is the ACLU.
Yep.
You know, hot on that. You know, the ACLU. They've got to be right in there to make sure that they take it all out. But
you know, who runs that?
Oh man, I'm telling you, it's a communist. It's got to be for sure.
It is commies.
Oh my goodness, yes.
The American Communist Liberties Union.
The American Communist Loser Unit.
There we go. That's better. Yeah.
But it really, in the end, when it all comes down to it, though, is a lot of these school shooters, they're bullied too.
Yeah.
This is what happens when you don't have accountability top to bottom in the schools. And the school and the teachers unions have been driving this for years to allow this to take place. One of the people that have come out to want to take our guns in Florida,
yep.
the one
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, the one smart aleck chick with the Cuban flag on her arm.
Jane.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, she came out and she said, well, yeah, I bullied him, so what the hell is it to you?
Right.
That young lady needs to be taken into custody. They need to charge her appropriately, and they need to make her in whatever parental unit it is that she may have available to her. They should be held civilly responsible, because there was a point in a time in our society when we came up back in the day, and we're not very far apart in age, but what I can tell you is that back in the day, parents were held civilly accountable in a dollars and cents sum amount for their children's actions.
Yes.
And that's where we've gotten away from it, because, well, poor little Jimmy's mommy Tammy has to work all these jobs, because her mean husband Tommy went ahead and took off because he was hooking up with someone else. No fault divorce. This is where this is all kind of, originating. Need to go back to fault divorce. You need to be able to make people to become adults and work things out. Do not tell me that it cannot be worked out. I do not believe it. I don't believe it for a second. It's like on-demand abortion. This is something, it's an instantaneous high. It's an instantaneous pleasure moment that they get immediately what they want, and they don't have to wait, and they don't have to work to get it. There should be no-fault divorces. Now, I'm not saying that in the case of abuse that we can't give that divorce. That's not a problem. Right. And I wish that there were times where there's legitimate cases of abuse, not someone's daddy coming over and whipping her ass because her husband refused to tolerate any of the garbage that her daddy had to deal out. But what I am saying is that there needs to be an element of responsibility that's deeply missing within our society. We do not hold educators at any level, including preschool, accountable for their actions. We see these people who run these daycares and stuff, and you end up seeing these poor kids that are drugged in some way, shape, or form, or they're fondled, or they engage in assume sexual positions, and they play out and they role play and they do this acting. This is what's tearing our country apart. This is what's making the difference. And people not sticking to what the Bible gives them, commonly referred to as the good book. And we've seen some of our religious institutions that have now said, well, we have to have a woman be the preacher. And she can definitely be a lesbian. And no, we don't have to follow those rules because, those rules are optional. Rules are not optional. Shall is not optional. Those are things that you're going to do. This is what it says. And when we've had this systematic breakdown of our disciplinary structure from the cradle to the grave, this is what we get. This is what Europe has gotten in return. This is what other countries have gotten in return. They get shit. They get shit on. The people that are good end up dying because why? There's no accountability. Speaking of no accountability, Winnie Mandela has been held accountable. She has arrived at her final destination in Judgment Day, and we have a really good idea where she went.
Yeah, her and the two most false flag things that false reported things are her and Nelson Mandela. Both of them super terrorist. Look at what's going on right now. Simon Roche came around. I met him. He's talking about there's 4+ million whites left on the South African continent. That's from Rhodesia and South Africa. Mm-hmm. And they are talking about exterminating them. Mm-hmm. Yet we will not open our borders, nor will the West. And when I say the West, capital W, I hope at least the East, and this, of course we're Russian bots for saying this. I hope at least the East, the Eastern Orthodox countries, open their borders to them, because these people are going to be exterminated. If you were to see Simon's presentation on what happens There's a mysterious thing. It's pretty wild, man. Pretty edgy for all you liberals out there. That
Well,
there's a new cure for AIDS, and all you have to do is, get with a virgin, and so they're going to infants, and then they burn them. I've seen it's disgusting. They destroy those human beings after they've done their little thing to get rid of their AIDS, because that's what their voodoo witch doctors tell them to do. And so yeah, we need to ensure that we give them a soft landing, because these people are intelligent farmers, and they're the only reason why the African continent isn't starving. And when they give the farms, this is a funny part, when they give the farms to these people, first thing they do is slaughter everything, and they eat it up, and then all of a sudden there's no breeding stock. They have no managerial skills on their thing. So anyways, that's my 2 cents.
Well, in Zimbabwe now, they're demanding that the whites return to their farms to show them how to manage them.
After
the country
they killed them, right?
After they killed everything off that was good, and so now you have a situation taking place where the country of Australia has raised the ire of the UN by saying, "Oh, we'll take all the white farmers that you can possibly send."
Yep.
And the UN wants them to do nothing whatsoever to be able to go ahead and help these people out. And this is the ultimate end goal. This is the same thing that happened in Haiti. For those who don't understand the history of Haiti, there was one individual that came from Africa to Haiti and led the revolution to slaughter everyone white, or they imprisoned the women. So, and they went ahead and they turned them into their slaves, which is, really isn't too terribly shocking. I'm not saying that it's okay, but they have a very short brain span of intelligence to understand what their actions do. These are the same people, much like with the Islamo-fascist, who, and time to time, we do see an imam give a sermon where they're like, "What have you contributed to the world other than to terrorize and kill other people?" And they all sit there and they look at each other like, "Well, that's what we're supposed to do." So these are people who do not possess the mental capacity to become industrious. Right. They don't have the mental capacity to be able to go ahead and to engage in designing or research and development of any kind of real products or any kind of real changes that makes the world a better place. And I'm not saying that all of everything has ever only come good from whites. I mean, after all, we had 2 black ladies that went ahead and worked the calculations of the one of the Apollo.
Well, that's actually been disproven. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh. So, it's there is still, though, a lot of great people that contributed greatly to helping our country become a better place. Right. Booker T. Washington couldn't stand racism.
You're right.
Couldn't stand them at all. And he was a great agricultural mind. So these are the things not taught in our schools. They want to go ahead and Black history is taught. Well, when they want to teach Black history, they're looking at certain authors that are communist in nature, socialist in nature, of how the world's supposed to look according to them. They want to go ahead and they want to accentuate the rappers and the people that engage in that behavior. It is not the type and style of things that we saw when we were in school back in the day. It's very, very different. It's very, very disheartening that this is allowed to continue. and run without being checked in any way, shape, or form.
The funniest thing to me was when I was in school in the 80s, okay, we had already beat the racial thing, okay? It completely beat it, okay? Not to borrow a tagline from Michael Jackson, but we did beat it.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time of the late 80s, it started to resurge. And it was always being done by the communists. The communists, the globalists, all this stuff keeps reemerging. And it's always the same people pushing it. Remember Rodney King? You know, can we all get along? And then the next thing you know, you got Reginald Denny getting his head cracked open.
Mm-hmm.
And then him sucking up, which honestly, you're not doing yourself a favor whenever you are saying the beating I got was the beating I deserved. No. What you need to do is put people in prison. And honestly, people forget that the beating that happened with Rodney King was he just would not stop moving. You know, he could have laid there supine, but no, he kept moving as a fight. And that does nothing good. It didn't look good on camera, but he was still moving. He was not being like, hey, if cops are around me with PR-24s hitting my legs, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna be like, okay, cool. Let's handle this in the courts. But he didn't do that. And
well, we've had 2 shootings within the last week that are going to end up being good shoots.
Yeah.
And people refusing to comply. If you don't comply, you're better off just to shut your mouth, comply, go to court and fight it. Because remember, there's camera footage from the body cams and from the cruisers now.
Yep.
It isn't like it used to be. It isn't my word. It isn't your word against their word. And now they're having severe discipline for those who refuse to turn on their cameras. And when they refuse to turn on their cameras, those cases need to be dropped.
Right. Look, the camera doesn't lie. Here's the thing. Nobody's looking at the truth. The truth is, once that camera gets turned on, and I really think in the Senate and the Congress, you remember C-SPAN and how it works.
Right.
We need to have that with everything the government does. I don't care what it is. When they're drafting bills, the government, you know, all these people want to say, and trust me, I've been in this game for a long time. If you're not actually in the game, you don't see how that sausage is made.
Right.
So why don't we put that everywhere? Why more transparency, not less? And this last bill, look, I think Trump is trying to fix things, but I also can criticize him honestly because he signed the omnibus, okay? And people will say, well, he can do this, he can do that, and there's some leeway there, but not a lot. But what I'll say is that instead of that, when they're drafting these bills, why don't we throw cameras everywhere? It's just like a federal court, and this really pissed me off because I was a Fed. You would have a court hearing on somebody, either criminal or whatever, and all of a sudden that piece of shit just gets drawings done of them, and the media can spin it however it's done, however they want to spin it. That's a problem. It needs to have microphones. The antiquated shit with the federal court system, everybody needs to talk to their congressman, talk to their senators. It needs to be in open court with mics. So we get those hot mic moments. Just like when Obama goes, and remember, there's only Russian collusion with Trump, but people forget the Russian collusion with Obama, the uranium one, which is probably what he was talking about. Honestly, I'm going to tell you the truth. When he says to Medvedev, tell Vlad I'll have more latitude after the election. His second election, right?
Yep, that is exactly what he did. No one wants to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let me see where we're at here in the grand scheme of things. Okay, so we want to go touch on something that recently happened. It actually happened this afternoon before we came on the air.
Cool.
Out in California. It seems as though there was an active shooting situation at the YouTube headquarters. We're seeing our friends over at DC Whispers are always on the ball with this stuff. At the shooting this afternoon, there are only 3 victims right now. One is critical, one is serious, and one is, what was the other one? I don't want to say lightly injured. I don't even think that would be, but one not quite so serious. I certainly hope they all recover well. But someone had and said, I didn't have a gun, but I wish I had. It was a YouTube employee.
Yeah.
You know, this is what's, you know, this is the backbone of our society. Guns. It is what used to keep our country honest.
An armed society is a polite society. Keep going, because I gotta go move something real quick. My dog's drinking water, and I gotta fill some water up. All right, I'll be right back. Keep going.
Yeah. But this is all part of the problem. People want to go ahead. They want to ban one person's liberties, but they don't want their own liberties banned. Just like in Florida, where they don't want to have clear backpacks. I really don't honestly believe that that a child like that needs to be in a position to make policy, let alone tell adults what they can and what they can't do. Because when they become majority adults, after they've graduated high school, which David Hogg has been shown numerous times to definitely already been graduated. Once they graduate and they have to function within the rules of society, then the reality is it's like a cold bucket of water in the face. It's like ice getting hit with it all of a sudden. And all of a sudden they learn that all those rules that they wanted to do have real-time consequences, of which it costs them in numerous ways that they failed to take into account when they want to go ahead and push these agendas. So it makes it really difficult to be able to go ahead and take them serious to a certain extent. The other part of the problem, though, is that people like Michael Bloomberg, John Kasich, George Soros, Barbara Boxer, oh my goodness, the list goes on, Nancy Pelosi, Chucky Schumer, all those folks went ahead, Joe Biden went ahead and authored the law of having gun-free zones.
Well, you know what's so funny to me? I ask people every time they want to know. Remember, I go back to the Cold War just like you, but, you know, I went into federal service. So, I mean, this stuff, you've been to my castle as I've been to yours, right?
Right.
And so, you know, I worked as I worked. But the funniest thing to me is I ask people, who drafted, and I mean this is before Obama was around. This is back when Bush was president, right? Who drafted the Patriot Act? And they're like, well, it was Bush, this, that, and the other. There's so much muff fake out there. And I said, no, Joe Biden. He's the one who drafted the Patriot Act. And that's what was in place under Bush. And look at what the Patriot Act has given us. The FISA court that was manipulated by the FBI. Look at how Homeland Security, when that act went in, look at how they put the ATF, BATFE, I love to say that because that's what they want to be called. The only thing they're good for are two things. First off, revenuers for the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, because they're tax collectors. You can still own a machine gun if you want to. You can brew beer to a certain amount, 100 gallons per person in your, or 100, yeah, it's 100 gallons per person in your house. It doesn't matter their age. You can brew that much beer. You can also make whiskey if you pay their tax. And you can also grow tobacco with the tobacco base. They collect taxes. They belonged in Treasury. They didn't need to be pulled out. The only thing different that they do is explosives, and they're very good at that. But they didn't need to go into or out of Treasury to do that, to work with. They wanted to be justice so bad they had to be Department of Justice, DOJ. Well, they're so dirty because of the other three aspects they handle. They have actually killed more people for nothing. And it makes me laugh. And yet they get brought into DOJ and somehow they're clean. And then look at how DOJ now is. Look at it. FBI, nobody believes you anymore. I don't believe you. I think FBI and DOJ are worse than the ATF now. Because we saw the politicization through the ATF. Gunwalker. Ruby Ridge. Yeah, oh, Ruby Ridge, the guy's a white supremacist. No, that doesn't mean you get to blow his wife's brains out while she's breastfeeding a baby. Yeah, that's a gun. That baby's a gun. Why don't you blow her brains out? Look at some of the atrocities they've done. Waco. Look at all the stuff. You know, El Amin City from Timothy McVeigh in Oklahoma City. Guess what? El Amin City was both a B&D run job by Andreas, the German, and the ATF, and the FBI. All this stuff with the Muslims. Look at the stuff you see. The retard we had in Dayton, who didn't even move out of his house until the FBI gave him $3,000. Move out of your house. And then buy a couple guns and tell us you're going to go do a big shoot. You know, it's all been done. Honestly, I have to say this, under Obama. And he was a false flag, and so was Michael. I'm sorry, Michelle. His lover, wife. I'm sorry, wife. And those kids have to be adopted. They look like neither of them. But she has spectacular arms. She's awesome. You know, and look at her on Ellen DeGeneres, where you can see that little bulge bouncing around as she's dancing with her. You know, don't sell something to me that I don't see.
Definitely.
My opinion, not Dano's. He can disagree with me all day long, but I'm gonna tell you what I think, and Dano will also. And and he'll call bullshit on me too. Trust
me. One other thing that I'm looking at here, Pamela Harris An assemblywoman. Let me see what city what her locale is here. Albany, New York. Brooklyn Assemblywoman Pamela Harris was indicted in January on a raft of corruption and fraud charges. She resigned on Monday.
I'm shocked.
No, not really. Sorry.
Me neither.
Shocked.
Me neither. Harris sounds like Miller to me. Miller, they're always crypto, and so is Harris. So, just it is what it is. The thing is, brother, we have some epic talks that nobody will ever know. And you disagree with me more than anybody. But here's the problem I see with Europe. It's actually going to hamstring them. It actually is hamstringing us too, but it's going to hamstring them first because they are the bellwether. And here's the thing that I see that's going on right now. You can't revisit history. Now, revisiting history is not like tearing down statues. That's history. If you find that history is wrong, then there's a case, and it should be taken very lightly to take those statues down.
Right.
But look at what happened at Charlottesville. Look at what happened in Tennessee. Look at what happened in South Carolina. Over shootings. The church shootings still, to me, I'm telling you, SSRIs are the key to all these shootings. I will say this, and Big Pharma, look, I don't smoke marijuana. I'm not going to ever try to do it again. I tried it at 14 and put me to sleep. It was stupid. It was the worst $2 I spent. I could have spent the same $2 to get a 6-pack of Schaefer's beer. But these SSRIs, they're changing our kids' minds. There's a reason why if you did SSRIs, you're not going into the military. They're not going to let you do it. And yet the military, once you've done a combat tour, will feed our veterans SSRIs. And now they want to say, if you have a mental problem, and a mental problem is basically what they give you to deal with whatever has happened.
Right.
They want to broad brush our military. No, they don't get to. Not with me. As long as Kaisers Kastle stands, you don't do that. Because
you don't get it. It's definitely for sure. I just want to break in here. Breaking. The shooter in California has been identified as, may I have a drum roll, please? White, adult. You ready? Here we are. Female.
Wow, isn't that neat?
Oh, no. This is going to get good now. I wonder who it was that sexually harassed her now. That's what I want to know. And some folks are going to say, Dana, that's nothing to laugh about. They drive the narrative on this. The narrative is driven. Just as they all want to, the lamestream media is all up in arms because Sinclair Broadcasting is set to more than likely have their merger approved that allows them to go ahead and consume Tribune Media, which means that they will get control of the Chicago Tribune and the LA Times as two of the biggest liberal spewing grounds of garbage in the last century. And all of the other local TV stations that they're going to go ahead and collect along the way, which will make them, and this is the part that's killing the liberals now, this will make them the largest free over-the-air broadcasting media outlet in the entire United States. So now you can go ahead and have Zuckerberg do all he wants to do, and that's all fine and dandy. But what's going to happen is the people don't have to go to the internet to get the truth. The truth is going to start to be on TV because now they're upset because Sinclair made their anchors read the statement that says We will not report our feelings. We'll only report the facts. The facts are both sides of the story, left and right.
Well, Dano, I'll give you the fraudulent facts for the media to consume. I hope they do. She's upset because I dick waved her. That's what happened. That's what sent her on the shooting bench.
Oh,
Not that she took Shantex or any other SSRI. Yeah, it was old Kaiser dick waving her.
Big old python out there running across the parking lot.
Whoa, you give me too much credit, my brother. I am Italian, but whatever. This stuff can't write itself. Look, folks, we're having fun here, and it's what it should be. Honestly, if you don't see the fallacies of this stuff they're pushing, and I'm glad. Look, the question of tolerance, the TQ, we have now proved the fact of the intolerance of tolerance. Because, look, they're going after their own professors in academia. You can go open source this. They're going after Jordan Peterson. There's people, Jay Dyer. He was doing his academic purpose, and he's got successful books because they're correct. He's finding things. All these people, TRS, TDS, all these people are looking at stuff. There's a guy, Ryan, he's doing stuff with Cold War podcast. There's so many people out there that are getting to the nub of the truth. And yet, what nobody wants to hear is that truth, except for people trying to hear it. And so we've, unfortunately, divided our nation 50-50. And unfortunately, the 50 is in the cities. I've said this in another podcast, and it was pretty low. But remember, there's always an outer belt, and that's a way to shut the cities down from the countryside. And guess what? Well, the cities don't have the guns. Only the countryside do.
They can't stand that the countryside still has the guns. They have to still try to figure out how to take those away, which isn't going to happen. So, we're going to go ahead. We're going to release the drawbridge.
Yep.
Time to write out. Go tend to the business and the kingdoms that needs to be tended to.
There you go, my brother. God bless.
God bless. Thanks for having me along. I appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity to be here on, what was it the name I gave it? KTRN? Yeah, KTRN.
KTRN. The Kastle Talk Radio Network. It's where our two castles talk together, and we show them that the globalists don't get to control everything. We control it.
There you go. Alrighty. I'm out of here.
All right, God bless, brother.
God bless, brother. Be safe.
All right. That was my brother, Dano, and we had an honest conversation about everything, and you folks had better understand we're trying to stop something you don't want to see. With that being said, Chef out.